Cubeatz have been behind some of the most iconic rap hits of this generation, with artists like Drake, Travis Scott, 21 Savage, Migos, and pretty much every other major rapper in the industry. They created a whole new vintage detune style that would change the sound of rap music from 2015 up until now. So today we're going to be breaking down some of the techniques used in Cubeatz' hardest samples and try to figure out what it is about their samples that makes them so legendary. One of the first instruments that comes to my mind when I think of a Cubeatz sample are bells. Just like the ones used on Motorsport by Migos and NC-17 by Travis Scott.
Me and my bitch, I swear we like the same sex. Ooh. Fuck with all my G's. Motorsport, yeah. Put that thing in sports. Shot it bad.
So to start off our sample, I grabbed a one shot from my Mini Stash Volume 2 kit, and I actually recorded this bell one shot on my new Mellotron M400D, which is a keyboard that Cubeatz has used in a ton of their samples. And then I created this super simple MIDI progression for the bells. A great way to get this dark, eerie Cubeatz kind of feeling in your melodies is to use minor chords and to also use half steps, which put simply is just notes that are one note apart from each other. And as you can see, this MIDI has a ton of those half step notes. Now that we've set the foundation with the MIDI, it's time to process those bells to sound a little bit more vintage like they would in a Cubeatz sample. We've definitely got a great start going with those bells, but if you ask me, the most iconic part of Cubeatz samples are those insane and legendary flutes.
Yeah. It's a BB's thing, yeah. I pull that they don't like to see you winning. They wanna see you in a penitentiary.
Pure J, don't tap water. This the real face. Fuck the bitch, broke our heart. She think we still dating.
To be honest, there's almost no way that you can replicate their quality of flutes by using VSTs. Cubeatz flutes sound so amazing because they work with session musicians to get real instrument recordings for their flutes. So for this sample, I did just that. And I grabbed this live flute phrase from the Mini Stash 2 kit. To make this flute phrase, I simply just clicked in the melody that I wanted the flute to play, and then I sent that over to an amazing flute player to re-record. Now, at this point, it can be super easy to get carried away and start adding 10 different instruments on top of everything, but if you really listen closely to Cubeatz' biggest hits, 90% of the time, it's stupid simple, with only 1 or 2 sounds being used for the majority of the sample. A great example of this simplicity is on Motorsport, where Cubeatz loop is pretty much just a bell. But to create a fire B section, Murda Beats added a texture to just kind of accent and add some more feeling to the melody.
And then for the intro, I added like a texture underneath. That's like, I just like chopped up the loop and like put like a texture on it.
So to do this for our sample, I grabbed some accents and phrases from the Mini Stash. To give these textures some more room, I half sped the bells so it leaves the whole high-end frequencies open for the textures to shine. Take a listen to the before and after. With that, the sample is pretty much finished, except for one key part. We need to flip it to really give it that authentic Cubeatz texture. And to do that on this sample, we're gonna mess with the pitch, the effects, and we're also gonna chop it. If you listen to the texture of the bells on NC-17, you can tell that they were heavily pitch shifted, which gave it just a super messed up and vintage kind of character. So the first thing I did with our melody was pitch it up 5 semitones to really warp the sound and get that sampled kind of feeling. But the real sauce is the plugins that I put on top of this. First off, we've got one of my favorite plugins, which is H910 Harmonizer. This plugin warps the pitch of the sample to give it that signature Cubeatz detuned kind of sound. And it makes it sound so much more vintage and kind of messed up, but in a good way. And second, I use the UAD tape recorder, which gives it a bit of distortion and grittiness. Take a listen to before and after. now we're gonna chop the melody, which is a signature Cubeatz style effect where it gives a kind of stop and go feeling to the melody. To do this, I loaded the loop up in my sampler and I increased the attack just to increase that stop and go effect. And now, let's test it with some hard-hitting drums. Every sound that I use in that sample was from my new Mini Stash Volume 2 kit, which is only $7. It comes with loops, vocals, live instrument phrases, presets, midis, and so much more. You're getting all of that for less than the price of a fast food meal. So if you want to level up your beats, don't sleep on that and click the first link in the description down below. Now, that first loop was sounding crazy, but Cubeatz have a ton more super dark songs with artists like 21 Savage, Drake, Offset, and more. And one of my favorite recent examples of this style is on Drake and 21 Savage's Jimmy Cooks, with that super menacing and evil violin sample.
Gotta throw a party for my day ones. They ain't in the studio, but they'll lay some.
Cubeatz co-producer Y Tizzle broke this loop down on his Instagram, and in the breakdown you can see that Cubeatz supplied the live violin and string starter. So to start our sample, I grabbed a live violin phrase from the Mini Stash 2 kit, and this is what that sounds like. And to thicken it up and add some variation, I duplicated the violin twice and added a half speed on one of them. So we have one violin playing normal in the high end, and then we have another one octave down that's playing more low notes. And this just really helps fill it out. Now that we got the violin done, I wanted to take some inspiration from Can't Leave Without It. As you can tell, the foundation for this sample is a super dark piano. So to recreate that, I recorded my real acoustic piano to capture that real instrument Cubeatz kind of texture. Now, we need to add some effects and processing to really bring this piano to life. To start, if you listen to the piano on Clout by Offset, you can tell that it's a super simple piano melody, but it has a super heavy delay effect, which helps fill out the sample and just create a ton more atmosphere.
Creep to a penthouse, Miami Beach. Yeah, yo. Niggas talk crazy on tweets. They don't want it cause I come to defeat.
So, first off, I added a simple delay and reverb. For the rest of the effects, I just added some EQs, taking out the frequencies that I didn't like. And then I also found this super dope free effect plugin called Magic Dice by Baby Audio. Shout out Max Shooter for putting me onto that, which just kind of adds like this weird spacey delay reverb kind of thing. After that, I put on RC20 with some detune, a little distortion, and some vinyl noise. And then lastly, an effect that I don't see many people using, especially for these dark vintage sampled kind of vibes, is distortion. If you want to get that authentic sampled sound, adding a subtle distortion is a super, super good trick. Now, before we do anything else, we want to keep simplicity in mind again. So instead of adding a ton more sounds to this loop, we're going to take the two that we already have and try to get the most out of every sound that we've already made, as well as add some variety with different sections in the sample. One easy trick you can do is mess with the octaves. For this one, I pitched the piano up an octave for a second section, which gives it a much more high energy feeling. And then for a third section, I took the piano, half sped it, and then reversed it. Kind of like the reverse piano that Cubeatz did on Drake's song Summer 16. This is what that sounds like. Now, as you can tell, after we reversed and half sped that piano, it's leaving a ton of open space. A little bit too much if you ask me. So I brought back the violin as well as the half sped violin and put them both in this section because I felt like it was the perfect space in the sample for the violins to really shine and have all of the high frequencies open to themselves. Now, we finished making the melody, but just like the first melody, we need to flip it a bit to really get that Cubeatz vibe down. If you listen to songs like 4 AM by 2 Chainz and Travis Scott and No Shopping by Drake and French Montana, you can hear that signature chopped Cubeatz sound.
I'm not a one-hit wonder, they know all my stuff. You let me turn into the nigga that you almost was.
So I did that for our sample by manually chopping every half bar and then dragging the audio a little bit to the left to create a tiny bit of silence in between each hit, and got this. And to take it one step further, I added some effects on top of this to really tie it all together and give that Cubeatz kind of sound. So the first thing that stuck out to me was there's some frequencies that I did not like in the sample. So I dropped the high end down a ton just to leave some space for the rapper's vocals to take up the high end. And I also took out more of these lower mids. Then I added a sound shifter and just pitched it down 2 semitones to give it a darker tone. And then I added another instance of this distortion just to give it that gritty sampled kind of feeling, as well as this UAD tape recorder to give it that tape saturation and even more of a distorted, warped kind of feeling. Let's hear it with some drums to test it out. That's hard. If you liked any of the sounds that I used in both of those beats, they're all inside the $7 Mini Stash 2 kit. So don't sleep on that. It'll be the first link in the description down below. Peace.